It may not be an Olympic gold medal, but I had my abstract chosen for an oral presentation at a science conference, and it feels pretty damn exciting. And so it's a virtual conference, and so today I want to tell you a bit more about virtual conferences, how they work, how normal conferences work, and that sort of. So the basic layout of most of these virtual meetings is that they have a poster session in some form. So that's where scientists are sharing more like hot off the press, works in progress type of thing. There's often younger like trainees and that sort of thing. That's often where they're presenting their work. And then there's oral sessions of some sort. So those are where people are talking. And so those can either be invited speakers who are chosen specifically to talk there, and usually like paid to come out and talk. And so the organizing committee or whatever asks them to come, and then they say yes please. But posters, and then the selected speakers or whatever, like the abstract selected speakers. So basically the abstract is like this paragraph long summary of the work that you are going to present. And you submit this abstract ahead of time to the conference, and you can say like, I want to give a poster, I want to give this as a poster, or I would like to be considered for a talk. And usually if you don't get chosen for a talk, then you get to give a poster. But the ones that they think are like worthy or whatever of a talk, I don't know how they decide, but those get to give a talk. And so this time I was chosen to give a talk. Last time I presented this meeting, I only gave a poster, so I'm really excited about giving a talk. And I was really, really excited when it was going to be in person, because it's like right here on campus, and I've like gone to a ton of these conferences over the years, and it's just been always like a dream of mine. But it's going to be virtual, and so there are pros and cons of virtual meetings, and the format's going to vary at different places. Advance warning that this talk is kind of like all over the place, and I'm jumping around, and I kind of like try to splice together different parts from different parts, so I might really repeat some things and that sort of thing. But I have to get back to work, and I don't have time to like edit this nicely, so sorry. The text version is organized a lot better and stuff, so if you just want to go to that, I don't blame you. So this is the eukaryotic mRNA processing meeting. It's held here at Cold Spring Harbor. Well, it's actually normally held here at Cold Spring Harbor. So like normally I would just be like down in this big auditorium, and it'd be really awesome. But this year it's going to be virtual, and so different organizations do virtual conferences in different ways. And so each one is different. I've been to a few, including multiple ones from the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, so I know how these ones are set up a lot better than I know like a bunch of other ones. So that's gonna be most what I'm talking about. Traditional classical conferences, what you normally have is you have these big you have poster sessions, and then you have oral sessions, and depending on how big the meeting is, you might have like multiple different oral sessions like split up. So like if you're like at the ASBMB meeting, like it's part of like FASEB or whatever, so it's like this huge or it's part of like the experimental biology conference, and so it's this huge conference, and there's like different organizations, and there's like it's held in like giant convention centers, and then there's all these like breakout rooms and whatever. So it's like if you're interested in like the RNA processing or whatever, you go to this session, and then if you go to that session, then it's at the same time as another session, and you can't go to that session. That sucks. At smaller meetings, like the CHSL ones, there's like just like one session. I mean like one place where all the talks are. So in this case, it's one Slack channel or one like Zoom where all the talks are, but then there's different sessions. So where I am is on Thursday, RNA and RNA protein interactions. So that's going to me on Thursday, the 20-something of August. So it's coming up, which is scary because I only have 12 minutes to talk and then 3 minutes for questions, and have to stuff in like 5 years worth of PhD, and it's like at the same time that I'm working on my thesis, where I'm like thinking about everything I did and like having to write down every single thing I did in these 5 years, and then it's like, what do I put in 12 minutes? Eek. In the written part, I have an edited version of like a school report I did. So I did this write-up about virtual conferences and some of the pros and cons, best practices, that sort of thing. There are some good things about virtual conferences, and so one of them is like the main thing probably is like accessibility, because I talk about like it's harder to meet people and that sort of thing. Well, it's a lot harder to meet people if you can't actually go to the conference. And so these virtual conferences make it a lot more accessible for people, both in terms of people who maybe can't afford to go, people from different, like even if like within, like even if they're local, they can't afford to go, or if they're like international, they can't afford to go, that sort of thing. So with the typical conferences, they often have like travel awards where if you're presenting your work, you can like apply for this travel award that'll cover at least like part of the cost of traveling and staying there and stuff. And often when you stay there, there's like hotel share type things where you can, there's boards where you can like hook up with other people, or that sounded wrong. You can like pair with other people going to the conference and like share hotel rooms with them and that sort of thing. And then sometimes if they're held at like schools or whatever, you can get like cheap housing on campus. But that's for the typical conferences, and for the virtual conferences, you don't have to worry about that at all. So typically there's still like a registration fee or that sort of thing, but you can often get fee waivers based on like if you can't afford it and that sort of thing. So know that those are options. And it's also more accessible for people with like physical disabilities, because often like with those giant conferences where they're like held all over the like giant conference centers, and like one session's at the one side and the other session's at the other side and the other session's at the other side, and then you have to like go back and forth and whiz it around, and so that's not very accessible. And the with the poster sessions too, like that's a lot of walking around, and even for people who don't have like limitations in terms of like walking around and that sort of thing, you can't physically go to see every poster, especially because they're only available at like limited times, and sometimes those times are overlapping with the oral sessions, and so you can't go to both, and it's just crazy. When they're just PDFs posted online, then you can go like anytime. The talks are different lengths at the different conferences and even within conferences, and so typically at conferences there's like invited speakers, and then sometimes they're like keynote speakers. There's like invited speakers and there's like keynote speakers, and then so the keynote speakers are like the big names usually, and they're often, they give some sort of like more historical or more overview, and they're typically like, they're often at like the beginning of a session, and they kind of like lay the groundwork for everything that follows. So they give some background and that sort of thing, so everyone knows what's going on, if you're not like in that specific subfield. So that's how it works at CHSL, which is really nice. And then so some people give like invited talks where it's like they go to a person, they're like, hey, can you give a talk at our conference? We want to hear from you. And then there are those people probably get like paid to come and stuff. But then there are like the chosen talks or whatever, selected talks from the abstract. So an abstract is basically like a one paragraph summary of the work that you're going to present. And so often this work is like unpublished work. It's like hot off the press stuff. So science conferences are a great way that scientists can share, like less polished information, but like stuff as it's coming. And like works in progress, especially with the poster sessions. Those are often like works in progress. And it's a really great way for scientists to get feedback from other scientists and to get ideas about things like that. So especially for young, or not young, but like, what do you call it? Like non-senior scientists, like trainees, like students, postdocs, early career scientists and that sort of thing. It's a really great way to kind of meet people in the field, get advice and opinions, and get a better sense. And so one of the bad things about virtual conferences is it's harder often to get to make those connections, especially for some of the conferences where so at the CHSL conferences, what they have is like they have Slack channels. So they have like a Slack channel for each different talk, and each post, or they have like Slack channels for like the talk sessions, and then like each poster has a Slack channel, and then the posters are shared as like PDFs that you can access throughout. But like at a normal conference, you'd have like poster sessions. So there's like this giant conference hall, and then they have these big like cork bulletins, and then you have these giant printed out posters. and then you like walk through and people will walk you through their poster and stuff. So now with the poster sessions, when they're just like PDFs hosted, like sometimes people will do what they'll do is they'll make a little short video, like walking people through their posters. Those are really nice. But yeah, but poster sessions are also just like a good way to kind of like meet people and talk with people, and so that's kind of harder with the virtual conferences. At some of these virtual conferences, you kind of get the sense that like the senior scientists are kind of just like they're all in contact with one another, like outside of everything else, and so they know what's going on with everyone else, and then like us people, like we're just like, I don't know, like how do I get into that inner circle? Like, how do I get to hear from these sort of people? So one of the great things about the Cold Spring Harbor's virtual meetings is that they do like these Meet the Scientists Zoom sessions where they, like if you're like a trainee, you have the option of like signing up for these Zoom sessions where it's like just like 5 people or so, and they have, they pair you with a couple of like the big name people, and then you can talk to them about like everything from work to like from their work, your work, career stuff, all of that. So that's really, really awesome. And they also sometimes have like breakout, like happy hour type things on Zoom, breakout rooms, and that sort of thing where you can kind of mix and mingle. And yeah, I haven't really explored that too much because I don't really like socializing that much, but I like meeting people, but it's kind of like hard and weird yeah. But anyway, there are different opportunities that you can take advantage of even in these virtual conferences a lot of the time, but not all of the time. So what's really cool is that, so the first CHSL meeting I went to didn't have this, but like now these more recent ones have had this like Zoom sessions after the oral sessions where it's like more of like an informal setting where you can kind of just like discuss with people, like any questions you can get answered after the talks or that sort of thing. And so it's kind of like at the normal meetings, like normally like in between the sessions and that sort of thing, there's like cookies and coffee and all sorts of things, and everyone just kind of like talks and introduces each other and that sort of thing. And so you're missing that with this virtual conference, but now they have this like Zoom rooms afterwards, which is really nice. So like I said, this is going to differ from conference to conference and from place to place and all of that. One last thing I forgot to mention is like time zones. So sometimes for the conferences, the talks are pre-recorded and sometimes they're live in terms of like the virtual ones. And so the live ones are really a lot nicer in terms of you can like ask questions live and that sort of thing, and it feels more like a real conference and it's more exciting and that sort of thing. But if the conference is being held in like a different country, then you might be having to present when you're in like the middle of the night or the crack of dawn or whatever. So normally like at a conference, like everyone would be in the same place, but when you're all over the world, then it's harder to get the time zones like functions or whatever. So what's nice about the CHSL ones is that they do it live, but then they also record it, and then they have the recordings accessible like the next like afterwards, so that people can like get caught up as the meeting progresses, and then they put the talks online afterwards for like a month or something, so that if you missed a talk you can go back and see it, which is really nice. And yeah.